It's got to be a limo.
There's business.
Well, how much is this going to cost?
20,000.
And there's pleasure.
I was thinking of something more private. Just you and me on a honeymoon in Paris.
Lovely.
Rides returns Friday the 14th of May on BBC One.
Football highlights on BBC Two now, followed in 20 minutes by the movie. Dennis Quaid stars in a rock and roll musical tracing the career and notoriety of pop legend Jerry Lee Lewis, Great Balls of Fire. The 50 million record-selling Barry Manilow sings his greatest hits in 20 minutes on BBC One. And now it's time for the news with Michael Burke.
The Americans are continuing to drum up support for military action in Bosnia, despite warnings they could wreck the peace plan. The misery there goes on. 15,000 more made refugees this weekend. A man's been charged with a minicab bombing on the night the IRA attacked London. And Manchester United celebrate winning the first Premier League title. Good evening. The United States has stepped up the pressure on the Bosnian Serbs to agree to the Vance-Owen peace plan for Bosnia. The American Secretary of State Warren Christopher left London tonight on a tour of European capitals seeking support for military intervention if the plan is not approved. The Bosnian Serb leader Radovan Karadzic signed it in Athens yesterday, but it has yet to be approved by their self-styled parliament. Today, Mr. Karadzic warns that American pressure may provoke the parliament into rejecting the plan when it meets on Wednesday.
The representatives of the Bosnian Serbs have already launched into the debate on which the future of the Owen Vance proposals and the course of events in Bosnia and elsewhere will depend. It's a debate between the reluctant and the openly hostile. Radovan Karadzic can expect a rough ride on Wednesday for having signed the plan. And now, his influence rapidly waning, he's trying to put the blame for failure on the American threat of force.
That's very bad. I mean, that makes me very hard time in my parliament, and that may be the cause that parliament refused this signature.
The grim figure of Ratko Adzic, the interior minister in the Bosnian Serbs' mostly unrecognized government, condemned the Owen Vance proposals as a plan for war rather than peace. With him and those who think like him, the threat of force is clearly not going to have any effect at all. Instinctively, morally, President Clinton wants to protect the Bosnian Muslims. Yet as he met Chris Patton to talk about the very different problem of Hong Kong today, he was fully aware that American public opinion was against getting mixed up in a war which could become open-ended. The only answer is the Gulf War formula. Get your allies on side. He's talking as though it's already been done.
We have agreed that we're going to keep the pressure up, have a united front and move forward, and we're developing our policy now.
But as his Secretary of State, Warren Christopher, has been finding out in London, other European governments are as reluctant as Britain's about arming the Bosnian Muslims. The idea of attacking Bosnian Serb positions from the air has had a little more support.
I've been very determined that we continue as allies and friends to consider the options that we have before us to move forward in this situation and to turn this aggression back, and that means dealing quite resolutely with the Serbs.
As Mr. Christopher headed off for Paris, he was still hoping to persuade his allies to agree what to do if the Bosnian Serbs rejected the Owen Vance agreement. The Americans think it's more than likely they will, and they want to be ready, fast, to react. So far, that approach doesn't seem to be working with the Europeans. Tonight, at the United Nations, the Security Council is meeting to discuss the progress of the Owen Vance plan. The aim is to get the Security Council to vote on it as soon as possible, if that is the Bosnian Serbs accept it. There are no dates on the timetable for the plan for Bosnia yet, but it'll demand, 3 days after the vote, a ceasefire across Bosnia-Herzegovina. 5 days later, heavy weapons must be withdrawn from Sarajevo, and 10 days later from all other confrontation lines. Within 45 days of the UN vote, all Serb, Croat and Muslim forces must go to the provinces assigned to them.
The present United Nations timetable really is only viable if the United Nations has got all its forces on the ground in Bosnia-Herzegovina. The trouble is, it's only got 9,000 there. It needs 75,000. And so the timetable, as envisaged at the moment, is therefore overambitious.
And there are going to be other problems. The UN isn't good at planning or paying for these operations, and Britain, which may be asked to provide up to 10,000 men out of the overall total, may have trouble putting a force that size together. But that's for the future. The question at the moment is, what will happen if the Bosnian Serbs reject the plan on Wednesday? The Americans still haven't persuaded their European allies to work out the answer to that. The allies hope that all the heavy pressure that's being exerted on the Bosnian Serbs will work and that they'll do what's wanted of them. But there's not been much reason to expect happy endings in what used to be Yugoslavia, if that is, the Owen Vance plan actually amounts to a happy ending anyway.
According to the UN, at least 15,000 more people in Bosnia have become refugees in the last 2 or 3 days. There's evidence that the Serbs are still actively involved in so-called ethnic cleansing in advance of any peace plan being implemented. British soldiers have escorted 250 Muslim and Croat refugees who'd fled from the area around Banja Luka across the front line to the comparative safety of Travnik in central Bosnia. It's thought they'll be followed by thousands more.
The front line at Turbe, 10 miles west of the British base at Vitez. Serbian positions are in the orchards and houses opposite. British UN troops going across no man's land to escort a new group of refugees heading for safety heard from the Serbs a direct threat of retaliation. If your solution is bombing Serbian people, said one of their officers, then start right away. In the event of military intervention, UN troops will perish as well as Muslims and Croats. Muslims and Croats are already on the move, some 250 of them pushed out of their homes near Banja Luka. The Serbs, it was said, with Balkan understatement, could no longer guarantee their safety. There was a price to be paid, 100 German marks for an adult, 75 for a child, and their belongings stayed behind. Some of the refugees had been protected, others had not. She said that Serbian extremists had torched her village and one man was killed, but she'd been helped by the military police and a Serbian neighbor. There were joyful reunions, but the plight of these people is desperate. This woman, expelled last Monday, was looking for her sister and failed to find her. Many thousands more refugees are believed to be on the way in a new wave of ethnic cleansing which UN troops are unable to prevent. This at a time when they are facing greater risks than before, and in the British sector, one regiment is handing over to another. Today, men of the outgoing Cheshire Regiment remembered one of their comrades, Lance Corporal Wayne Edwards, killed by sniper fire last January. Martin Bell, BBC News, Gorni Fakuf, Bosnia.
Here, a 22-year-old man is to appear in court tomorrow, charged in connection with the minicam bomb which exploded hours after the massive City of London blast just over a week ago. 9 other people who are being held under the Prevention of Terrorism Act have now been released.
The bomb exploded in Judd Street, Holborn, just before midnight on Saturday, April the 24th. The driver of the minicab had been ordered at gunpoint to go to Downing Street. This is where he decided to abandon his vehicle. The hijackers of the other minicab, commandeered that night, are thought to have had Scotland Yard as their target. The police say that a man arrested under the Prevention of Terrorism Act last Tuesday has been charged with causing an explosion. He's John Gerard Matthews, he's 22 and unemployed. No address has been disclosed. He'll appear before magistrates in East London tomorrow morning. Meanwhile, 3 people still being held in connection with the bomb which devastated the city on the same day as the minicab hijackings have now been released. John Silverman, BBC News at Scotland Yard.
Israeli soldiers have shot and killed 4 Palestinians at a roadblock in the occupied Gaza Strip. An army spokesman said the Palestinians were in a car which failed to stop at a checkpoint near the El Burej refugee camp. Representatives from East Germany's metal union have agreed to hold talks aimed at ending East Germany's first legal strike for more than 60 years. The strike has brought selected steel and engineering plants to a virtual standstill. The action by an estimated 18,000 workers comes after managers dropped plans to pay workers promised wage increases. The pay deal was designed to bring wages in the East up to the levels in the more prosperous West. Managers argue that large pay rises could cripple German industry. A man has appeared at Luton Magistrates Court charged with the murder of Marina Turvey and her 7-month-old daughter Charlene. David Edwards was also charged with attempting to murder John Turvey. He was remanded in custody for a week.
The family of Marina and baby Charlene Turvey arrived at court in Luton in a highly emotional state. John Turvey and his mother wept openly. Relatives of David Edwards' family were also there for the special bank holiday hearing. Police ushered both families into the building. Edwards was brought into court from nearby Luton police station, where he's been questioned for the past 2 days. As he stepped into the dock, handcuffed to a police officer, John Turvey leapt up and shouted and swore at him. He was held back by members of his family. Edwards was charged with the murder of 19-year-old Marina Turvey and the murder of her 7-month-old daughter Charlene last Friday. He was also accused of attempting to murder John Turvey. There was no application for bail and he was remanded in custody. There were scuffles and more shouting when the court proceedings ended, and as the Turvey family emerged into the sunshine, frustration and emotion burst out again. They were led away by police and driven to their homes in Luton. Adam Minot, BBC News, Luton Magistrates Court.
The former Italian Prime Minister, Giulio Andreotti, has said he's in favour of Parliament lifting his immunity from prosecution on corruption charges. He said the accusations were totally false, and he hoped the courts wanted only to establish the truth. The 74-year-old Christian Democrat has been a leading figure in Italian politics for more than 4 decades. Princess Margaret's son, Viscount Linley, is to marry later this year. Viscount Linley, who's 12th in line to the throne, has become engaged to Serena Stanhope, whom he met several years ago. The wedding is to be held in London, though no date has yet been set. Stephen Hendry has won snooker's Embassy World title for the 3rd time, overwhelming Jimmy White by 18 frames to 5. Leading 12-4 overnight, Hendry made short work of taking the 6 frames he needed to retain the title. It was White's 5th defeat in a world final and earned Hendry a record prize of £175,000. Manchester United have been presented with the FA Premier League trophy at Old Trafford. United, who were confirmed as champions when their only rivals Aston Villa lost yesterday, have been celebrating in style, beating Blackburn this evening 3-1.
United fans had been at Old Trafford since early morning. Their eventual reward, a mid-afternoon glimpse of the men who've won the first Premier League title ever and the club's first championship since 1967, when Charlton, Law, Best and Busby had all the glamour and the success. Only the success, in the league at least, went away. Everything, everyone else remains. It's over 20 years since Sir Matt Busby was in charge. Still he's revered by the fans who parted inside the stadium before the kick-off.
This is what you want. This is what you want. Put all the problems you for so that you can have little moments like this.
The result, played out in front of 42,000, United's biggest crowd of the season, was academic. There'd even been a Blackburn goal before the celebrations resumed through Giggs, a symbol of United's present and future, proudly appreciated by Alex Ferguson, his manager. From then on, it was truly United's night. The second goal from Paul Ince, another player of profound influence this season. And after that, a distinct echo of the past from Giggs, the new George Best. Then, the goal that capped everything from Gary Pallister. 3-1 the result, and Alex Ferguson wreathed in smiles, a man transformed from his edgy failure of last season.
One thing I will be saying to them now is, if you've got the hunger you had this season and the desire to do it, then you can go on to do very, very well in the game.
United's party will continue long into the early hours. Rob Bonnet, BBC News, Old Trafford, Manchester.
The main news again, the Americans are continuing their talks with European allies on military action in Bosnia. The Bosnian Serb leader has warned that threats of such action could wreck the Vansoen peace plan. In Bosnia itself, the misery goes on. Another 15,000 people have become refugees this weekend. That's it from the newsroom. Good night.
Hello, Well, good evening. The President of the Board of Trade, Michael Heseltine, was pelted with eggs whilst addressing a meeting at Thatcham tonight in the run-up to the Newbury by-election. In a frenetic day of campaigning, the Education Secretary, John Patton, earlier visited the constituency to defend the government's policy on schools testing.
The Education Secretary, John Patton, was the latest senior Cabinet Minister brought into Newbury to add impetus to the Conservative campaign. Posing with a local headmaster, he was keen to show that hostility to standard testing in schools isn't universal.
I think that people will begin to realise over the years, as tests at each level are introduced, how they are raising standards overall for children in this country, where particularly in the bottom third of ability we do lag, so all international figures show us, a long way behind some of our competitors like the French and the Germans.
The Liberal Democrats were in Kintbury, still chasing the rural vote. They believe concern about the tests will help their chances on Thursday. Labour set up camp at the Newbury Fair, urging voters here to help boost their traditionally small share of the vote.
There are 16 other candidates standing in the by-election, making 19 in all, and that's a record for any parliamentary election. 6 of the candidates are campaigning on an anti-Maastricht platform. Reading Football Club has postponed plans to remove crowd control barriers after trouble during the weekend match with Swansea. 7 people, all Swansea fans, will appear before magistrates charged with criminal damage and public order offences. In a separate incident, a Portsmouth football supporter was badly injured during a fight at a hotel in Sunderland. Wayne Giffing is now in a critical condition at Newcastle General Hospital. And that's the main news in the south tonight. More on Breakfast News tomorrow with Jenny Hull. Now the weather details in London with Bill Giles.
A very good evening to you. Well, I do hope you've enjoyed the bank holiday weekend. Really hasn't been too bad today. Certainly there have been some showers around, but most of them up in the north. And most of us, in fact, have had a fair amount of sunshine. You can see on the league table, Isle of Man came off best with 13 hours and 18 minutes or so. And many places ending up 8 to 10 hours of glorious sunshine. Well, the high pressure then is dominating the scene, but we've got weather fronts up in the north. They're going to be briefly pushing across into parts of Scotland through tonight. You can see this on the weather map quite nicely. This is the area of cloud and rain. That's going to push its way across into Scotland. I think the rain eventually getting up into Lerwick, I think by the end of the night, with the heaviest of the rain in the north, patches of rain coming further south. But for most of England and Wales, ending up a dry night, a fairly misty night in that southeastern part. Now the winds are quite light down in the south, but quite strong up in northern areas. Winds, in fact, getting up to, 20 to 25 miles an hour. So that'll keep the temperatures up in the north, but down in the south, a cold night. There could well be a widespread ground frost, I think almost anywhere, except right along the coast. I think there we're likely to stay with temperatures above freezing. Going ahead then to Tuesday, high pressure dominating the scene, with these weather fronts just clipping up into northern parts. So as far as tomorrow's concerned, really not a bad day, a dry day over most parts of England and Wales, a good deal of sunshine too. Sunshine becoming more and more hazy as we go further north. In fact, a good deal of cloud in the northern part of Scotland. Windy weather, bits and pieces of rain about, but then gradually brightening as that rain pushes its way northward and brightening up over some southeastern parts of Scotland. Let's have a look at the temperatures tomorrow. Really not too bad. A bit cold near the coastal fringes, but up to 16 or so in many inland places. And then looking ahead to the next 2 or 3 days, high pressure really dominating the scene. But you can see the isobars getting fairly close together down in south, so quite windy weather in southern parts. There we're going to find it quite cold, but many places ending up dry with some sunshine. That's it from me. Bye for now.
Big trouble in a small size.
Nobody's ever made such a fuss about a bath before.
Careful, Shane. Starry eyes.
So easy.
And broken hearts.
You say you don't want me. I don't want you. They're not worth the space they take off.
Growing Pains, Wednesday at 8 o'clock on BBC One.
What you're about to see is a true story.
Mess with Ruby and you can expect stardom.
This really is Ruby's nanny.
Marriage. Religious conversion.
I am a pagan.
And health advice.
God, could you get rid of that cigar?
When you risk getting the full wax, tune in Thursday at 10 on BBC One.
I knew this would end in tears.
Barry Norman will be talking about the latest events on the big screen, including the comedy Groundhog Day, starring Bill Murray, as well as meeting director Ken Loach on location. Film 93 in an hour. Music, first on BBC One, in a megastar performance at Wembley last month. The greatest hits concert of Barry Manilow.